If you haven't got a Bible, I suggest you go and get one, because what I've got to show you is really exciting, and it's much easier if you can follow it from the actual Bible. Now, I've been interested in Bible prophecy since I was a child, and this passage I've been reading over and over and over, and the really important part is that I've only just found some meaning for it that is really exciting. If you look with me then at Joel chapter 3, it's quite hard to find, it's one of the minor prophets. Joel chapter 3 is a latter day prophecy. It says here, look, in those days, at that time, verse 1, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. So this is a passage that we all sort of recognise as being sort of the Armageddon, the last days. So that's the context, which is important to bear in mind. Now, what does it say then about this time? There, it says, in the valley of Jehoshaphat, there I will enter into judgment against them, that's all nations. So God is going to judge all the nations of the world in which we live. The important point about this passage is it says why God is going to do that. He's going to enter into judgment against them concerning my inheritance, my people Israel. Now this is really important, because you'll have to be half blind not to realise that most of the politics and trouble in the world, in the end, as far as the media is concerned, comes down to Israel and the Palestinian question. And that's going to be the focal point, it says here, in the latter days. I'm going to enter into judgment against the nations of the world because of his inheritance, his people Israel. Now why? What did they do then, according to this passage? What did they do to God's inheritance Israel? For it says, they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. I'll read it again. They scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land. So the nations of today, that's the world that we live in, are going to be responsible for scattering God's people Israel among the nations and dividing up his land. Now that hasn't happened yet, has it? When I was a boy, I used to think that was AD 70, 2,000 years ago, when in fact Israel was scattered among the nations by the Romans. But of course that can't be what it's saying here. It says they cast lots for my people in verse 3. So this is an interesting theme, by the way, that goes through some of the other minor prophets. I'm going to skip verse 4 and add in some more detail here. It says verse 5, you took my silver and gold and carried off my finest treasures to your temples. You sold the people of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks, that you might send them far from their homeland. Now listen carefully to those words, because you will have heard them. Very similar words spoken perhaps by the Iranian president, Mr. Ahmadinejad, who speaks about sending Israel far from their homeland. But the important point is this. The important verse is, in fact, the one I missed in verse 4, because in this context then, in which we've got the nations being judged for scattering God's people around the world and doing this deal with the Greeks, who I'm sure in Bible language must be the sort of Western world, there is this verse in verse 4. In the middle of all this, what is the context? Verse 4. Now it says, what have you against me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all you regions of Philistia? Are you repaying me for something I've done? So specifically, in this context, is mentioned two places. Tyre and Sidon, southern Lebanon. You've heard them on the news. And the coasts of Philistia. That's the Gaza Strip. Anyone who knows any Bible history will realise that's the place where the Philistines used to live, and in fact it's the relation to the word Palestinians. So those two places, Tyre, Sidon, southern Lebanon, and Philistia, or the Gaza Strip, are the two very places that are mentioned right in the middle of this latter-day prophecy. And honestly, that was jaw-dropping for me. When I read this in the context a year ago and started to see these things happen, I really for the first time understood this passage had been written for 2,500 years, suddenly mentioning our very, very relevant nations. So I wanted to share that with you on my way to work, and hope it encourages you, as it encouraged me, to realise that God really is in control of the world, and there's some very, very exciting things to say in Bible prophecy.